Dad was always saying stuff every day, so it's really great he died quickly. But Mom is really stubborn. I was stunned by my daughter Amelia shouting on the phone. She used to be such a good girl when she was little. How did things end up like this? What? Dad? Just stuff like disappear already or are you still alive? He's just in the way. Imagining the pain my husband Aiden endured made it hard to breathe. Something decisive within me was fading away. Oh, no, I didn't mean it. Seeing me and Ava, Amelia's smile froze. I cut off her stammering excuses and declared, "Don't speak, all right? If you're volunteering to talk, I don't need it. I have no interest in speaking with you at all." The person in front of me was no longer my daughter. The love had disappeared, leaving only the guilt of having raised such a person. Resolutely, I took a new step forward. My name is Evelyn. I'm a 54-year-old housewife. Not long ago, I was living happily with my husband Aiden, who was 2 years older than me. Aiden, please rest in peace. It doesn't hurt anywhere anymore, right? It's sad, but goodbye. The day my beloved Aiden passed away, I was too stunned to cry. Instead, I cried and cried until my tears dried up. Relatives, friends, various people took turns comforting me. Of course, my family quietly supported me too. The family left to me was my daughter Amelia, who Aiden and I had, and her husband Mason. Amelia is now 29 years old. She had her struggles during her teenage years, but now she's all settled down. She became a bright, cheerful, dependable adult woman. Now she doesn't live with me, but is married to a man named Mason, and they live in a suburban apartment. Mason, though younger than Amelia, is very responsible and kind. He helped with the funeral arrangements, which was a great help. A kind husband, a cheerful daughter, and a considerate son-in-law. I never thought the family I considered so perfect would fall apart like this. No, I must have just been oblivious, as everything had likely been crumbling long before. Thinking back, the first signs probably appeared about 15 years ago. At that time, Amelia was in middle school. It was a rebellious and difficult period for her. She's been going out a lot lately. I leaned in at Aiden's grumble. I had been thinking the same thing, so I saw this as a perfect opportunity to discuss it with Aiden. She was late coming home again today. She often doesn't come home until it's dark, far past the time school gets out. That's right. She seems to be influenced by her friends. She even dyed her hair without permission. I don't know what to do anymore. Amelia was such a good girl when she was little, bright and adorable, a daughter to be proud of. She was a bit cheeky, but I raised her with love. Up until elementary school, she was a perfectly normal child, I thought. But things changed when she entered middle school. Her friends started dressing sloppily, and she began to act irresponsibly as well. The other day, she had a band-aid on her earlobe, and to my surprise, she had pierced her ear. You're not getting involved with any strange people, are you? It's dangerous, you know. If something were to happen... Shut up! Conversations like this became frequent. Aiden, hearing my concerns, looked very worried too. As time passed and she entered high school, Amelia began staying out overnight without permission. Where were you? I was worried sick. At least let me know. I couldn't help but raise my voice. It wasn't anger as much as an anxiety that made my chest feel like it was being crushed. However, she seemed completely unfazed. Huh? Annoying. With that, she would just go to her room. Gradually, the stress began to take its toll on me. Aiden tried to talk to Amelia, but she wouldn't listen. In fact, she began staying out even more, claiming we were too persistent. My old friend of 20 years, Ava, invited me to a cafe to talk about my worries. I found comfort in spending time with Ava. Was my way of raising her wrong? I couldn't help but mutter, and Ava sighed. Ava, herself a mother of 2 boys, couldn't fully understand the difficulties unique to raising a girl. However, having had children earlier than me, she listened to my worries reassuringly. Amelia isn't a little kid anymore, right? It's not just about how you and Aiden raised her. Think about it. When we were in high school, weren't we more influenced by our friends and TV than our parents? Ava's comfort lightened my heart a little. Indeed, she was right. I was never a delinquent, but during high school, the conversations with friends were much more important to me than what my parents said. Realizing this, I could understand why she found our concerns annoying. When I got home, Aiden also tried to encourage me. Let's continue to show her love. She'll understand when she grows up. Bolstered by Ava and Aiden's words, I decided to trust in Amelia and keep our daily life unchanged. She still ignored me when I talked to her and continued staying out overnight. Her makeup became flashy and she started doing her nails. It seemed she had a boyfriend, but she never introduced him. He was probably not a serious person. In early May, Amelia came home unusually early. By this time, I had grown accustomed to her late returns, and her early arrival surprised me. You're early. Welcome home. Are you having dinner with us tonight? When I spoke to her, Amelia, unlike her usual self, didn't retreat to her room but seemed to have something to say. Wondering what was going on, I saw her pull something from behind her back. For Mother's Day. I couldn't believe my eyes. Amelia was holding out a single red carnation. I never imagined I would receive a Mother's Day gift from her. I was so happy I teared up. Thank you. Amelia smiled and went to her room. Overjoyed, I put the flower in a vase and proudly showed it to Aiden when he got home. Look, Amelia gave me this. Seeing the bright red carnation, Aiden also smiled. I couldn't help but hope that our relationship with Amelia would gradually improve. However, that night, when I got up to use the bathroom, I noticed a light on in Amelia's room. It was already 2 a.m. I wished she would go to bed earlier. As I quietly observed, I heard cheerful conversation. She seemed to be talking on the phone with a friend. I couldn't help but overhear. You should just use parents until they drop. Yeah, just talking to them is like volunteer work. The outrageous words made me recoil in shock. Amelia, unaware that I was listening, continued boastfully. You can easily fool them by doing something nice. My mom cried over a $1 flower I gave her for Mother's Day. The carnation I received earlier that day flashed through my mind. Biting my lip, I quietly walked away from her room. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual and immediately shook Aiden awake. I needed to discuss Amelia's phone call from the previous night. Aiden listened in stunned silence, then scratched his head and furrowed his brow. Is she serious, or just saying that to fit in with her friends? Hearing this, I recalled the smile Amelia had when she gave me the carnation. Deep down, I wanted to believe that was her true self. Soon, a sleepy-looking Amelia came downstairs. Aiden and I couldn't help but stare at her. She tilted her head and said, "What's up? Good morning." Seeing her like this, Aiden and I couldn't help but let our guard down. We exchanged a wry smile, deciding to trust in Amelia's sincerity after all. 10 years later, when I was in my mid-50s, my beloved Aiden fell ill. Despite being newly married, Amelia actively helped with his care. It made me happy to see that what Aiden had once said was true, she did understand as an adult. However, Aiden did not seem pleased with Amelia's visits. Curious, I asked Amelia about it. Dad seems to think he's being a burden to me, she said, looking down. I nodded in understanding. Taking Amelia's downcast words at face value, I ended up admonishing Aiden. It's okay to rely on her. She's making up for the troubles she caused us in the past, I said with a smile. Aiden looked sad and unconvinced. After about a year of battling his illness, my beloved Aiden passed away. He was only 56. I was heartbroken. After the funeral, Amelia held my hand. Why don't you come live with us? You must be lonely by yourself. We're family, we should help each other. I gladly accepted her invitation. Since Amelia and Mason's apartment was small, we decided they would move into the house Aiden and I had lived in. First, we needed to clear out the house. Each item was filled with memories, making it hard to part with them. Amelia and Mason often helped with the task. As we sorted through things, they would say things like, "This brings back memories," and "This is nice, we can use it." Their youthful enthusiasm was endearing, and I felt a strong sense of family. As normalcy began to return, I resumed working part-time. Today, Amelia came over in the morning, so I left her in charge of the house while I went to work. When my part-time job was over and I stepped outside, I found it pouring rain. A colleague checking the weather forecast told me it would likely continue. Without an umbrella and needing to walk to the station, I decided to wait for the rain to stop. I'm sorry, I'll be late because I'm waiting for the rain to stop, I called Amelia at home. She responded cheerfully. All right, I'll make dinner and wait for you. Mason is coming over tonight, so I'll cook some steaks. I was grateful that she was taking care of the house chores. Despite Aiden having passed away, I felt fortunate to have a new family in Amelia and Mason. As I waited in the office lobby, a familiar car pulled up. Evelyn, I was just on my way to your house. Perfect timing, hop in, called Ava from the driver's seat. She happened to be passing by and offered to give me a ride home. I'll be home much earlier than expected. Thanks, Ava. During the ride, we caught up with each other. I shared that I was living with Amelia and Mason and that we were planning to make it permanent. Ava was genuinely happy for me. But everything took a turn for the worse when we arrived home. It was summer. And as we got out of the car, we heard Amelia's loud voice on the phone. Dad used to say all sorts of things every day, so it was great when he died early. Mom is really stubborn, though. I was shocked and instinctively grabbed Ava's arm. She also looked tense. And we both moved quietly to the window, trying not to be noticed. What? Yeah, I told Dad to disappear and asked why he was still alive. He was just a nuisance. I felt terrified. Those cruel words were directed at Aiden. This explained why Aiden had been reluctant to accept her help. I felt a deep sense of regret for not realizing it sooner. Yes, Mom's parents' home is in the countryside, but Grandma and Grandpa are wealthy. We definitely want the land and house. So, we'll have to be patient for a while. Once we get the inheritance, we can get rid of her. Hey, Mason, do you know how to get an advance on the inheritance? I felt the blood drain from my face. Amelia and Mason were not the loving family I thought they were. Realizing this, I instantly decided to sever ties with them. The affection I felt just moments ago vanished as if it had never existed. I never knew love could disappear so completely. I see, so that's how you really feel. The phrase trembling with anger isn't an exaggeration. As I muttered this, I opened the door. Seeing me and Ava, Amelia's smile froze. "Oh, no, this is..." Amelia stammered, almost dropping her mobile phone, trying to make excuses. I watched her coldly. Just minutes ago, I thought she was a kind and considerate person. I had believed she had turned her life around after her troubled past, but it was all a misunderstanding. I couldn't forgive myself for being so blind, thinking she had grown into a respectable adult. If I had realized sooner, Aiden wouldn't have had to suffer. I was overwhelmed with sadness and regret. I cut off Amelia's excuses. "Don't speak. If talking to me is just a volunteer effort for you, then don't bother. I have no interest in talking to you." I exchanged a glance with Ava and entered the house together. Inside, I saw Amelia's bag and some tools Mason had left behind. I grabbed them one by one and threw them out the window. "What are you doing?" Amelia protested and tried to grab me, but I resisted with all my might. Ava, who was physically stronger, helped push Amelia out the front door while I finished throwing everything out the window. Amelia hurled insults as she struggled with Ava. Our eyes met, and I couldn't hold back my bitter words. "Even when you turned rebellious, even when you said terrible things, even when you called us annoying while talking loudly on the phone with your friends, I tried to believe in the child I gave birth to. But it was all in vain. If I had cut ties with you sooner, Aiden wouldn't have had to suffer." I felt heat on my cheeks and wiped them absent-mindedly, only to realize my hand was wet with tears. I had been crying. "It was just a joke," Amelia said, her face twisted in a grin. The immense disgust I felt for her at that moment was overwhelming. Shaking off Ava, I swatted away Amelia's hand as she tried to touch my shoulder. "Don't touch me!" I shouted fiercely. In the commotion, she dropped her mobile phone. It was still connected, and Mason's name was displayed on the screen. I picked up the mobile phone and threw it with all my strength. With a force that made me want to shout "nice pitch," the phone flew out the window and landed on the road in front of the house. "My phone!" Amelia screamed and ran to get her phone. In the meantime, I closed all the windows, locked them, and secured the front door with the chain. "Hey, doesn't Amelia have a spare key? Won't she bring that rude Mason with her?" Ava's words made me realize the situation. Mason looked like trouble, and as two women in our 50s, we would likely be overpowered. Following Ava's suggestion, I decided to ask for help from those around me. Besides the neighbors, Ava's sons also came over, and we spent time together. Of course, I decided not to live with Amelia and Mason anymore. It wasn't just that. I made up my mind to leave this house and move far away. I want to go somewhere Amelia and Mason can't reach. I never want to see them again. I want to go to a place where we won't run into each other by chance. So, instead of calling a moving company, I called my friends and a thrift store. They couldn't come right away, so I first reached out to nearby friends and relatives. "Please take whatever you like. Dishes, furniture, anything." Though few could come that day, when I said it was first come, first served, some rushed over. I also invited the neighbors present. "Feel free to take the TV, the fridge, whatever you want. I'm starting fresh and want everything new." I packed valuables and essentials into a travel bag. The neighbors happily took chests and the new vacuum cleaner. As night fell, relatives and friends began to arrive. They picked out nice pots or Aiden's golf equipment, smiling and asking, "Is this really okay?" I felt much better knowing that these items were going to people who appreciated them, rather than being left to Amelia and Mason, who were so heartless. As people were packing up, a loud car pulled up outside. As expected, Amelia and Mason had returned. They probably intended to ask for my forgiveness. From the window, I saw Amelia holding a box of cake. Thinking she could make amends with a cake was completely absurd. The two seemed confused by the number of cars parked around the house and the people going in and out. I stood up and headed to the front door to send them away.
Hey, what's this? What's going on? That bag is the one I wanted.
Seeing the electronics in my high-end bag being taken away, Amelia turned pale. Mason also stood there, dumbfounded, in the entranceway.
Thief!
Amelia tried to grab a friend who was taking the TV, but the people around stopped her. Everyone here had already heard from Ava and me about the misdeeds of Amelia and Mason. No one was going to listen to what Amelia and Mason had to say now. She kept shouting about thieves. But to me, it felt like these two, who had pretended to be family, were the real thieves who had stolen our time and affection.
Get out! Don't touch anything! Everything in this house belongs to the people who are important to Aiden and me. There's nothing here for heartless people like you.
I shouted with all my strength. Even after hearing my words, Amelia and Mason didn't leave. In fact, they started trying to come inside, so I resorted to my final measure. I called out to certain people who were already waiting with Ava in the room.
Olivia! Liam!
Seeing the people who came out, Amelia's face twisted in fear. Mason was also stunned, his mouth agape. Because standing there were Mason's mom, Olivia, and dad, Liam. They knew each other well, of course, since they were Mason's parents. After I explained the situation over the phone, they came over immediately. I felt like I needed to apologize for how my daughter had turned out. But Olivia and Liam actually sympathized with me. It seemed they had also been troubled by Mason's behavior for a long time. Liam walked to the entrance, his face full of silent fury, and grabbed Mason's arm firmly.
Ouch! Stop it! That hurts!
Mason was dragged away by Liam. Liam, apparently strong from working in construction, made Mason unable to resist. Mason shouted, but Liam's large, silent, and imposing figure walked steadily on. Next, we had a few people help get rid of Amelia. My relatives and I managed to drive her away with words.
Leave now. There's nothing more for you here. You already took Aiden's inheritance in cash, didn't you? Consider that your settlement. Don't ever come back. Even if you do, you won't be allowed in. You're a stranger. Understood?
I closed the door after saying that, then sank to the floor. Despite the intense hatred I felt, she was still my daughter, whom I had carried and given birth to. Regret for raising someone I had to cut ties with overwhelmed me, and I started to cry. Ava, who had come close at some point, gently patted my back. After that, Amelia and Mason never came to the house. It seemed Olivia and Liam were keeping a close watch. I felt full of guilt knowing they were monitoring not only Mason but also Amelia. I sold the remaining items to the thrift store and entrusted the sale of the house to a real estate agent. Excluding Aiden's portrait, my moving belongings fit into just 2 Boston bags. How light I felt. It was a strange feeling to be in a familiar house with nothing left. I decided to temporarily stay at my parents' home while looking for a new place to live. On the way to my new residence, the phone rang. The name displayed was Amelia. I didn't feel like talking, but I decided to answer for a moment and heard only sobbing instead of words.
Crying won't help. Don't call me anymore.
That's all I said, and instead of the pain I would have felt hearing Amelia cry, I only felt revulsion. I never imagined there would come a day when I would feel this way about my daughter, whom I had carried and given birth to. When I arrived at my parents' home, they greeted me with somber expressions. The room I had spent my childhood in would now be my living quarters. Alone, I cried all night, watching the sunrise without a wink of sleep. The sky outside the window gradually brightened, reminding me of the sunrise on the mountain top where Aiden had proposed. When we were young, Aiden and I used to enjoy hiking. On a morning that felt like that day, I somehow felt Aiden urging me forward. I decided to move to a faraway place without telling anyone the address so that Amelia couldn't visit. From now on, my family consisted only of my parents. Amelia, Mason, and any future grandchildren were strangers to me. Though I had resolved this in my heart, Amelia didn't have only me to rely on. She still had my parents and Aiden's parents. After I left the house, Amelia, free to move, first tried to turn to Aiden's parents. But my PIL, having heard the story from me, were furious and turned Amelia away. Even though she was their beloved granddaughter, she was the one who had said cruel things to Aiden during his illness. It's no wonder they didn't want to help her after hearing that. Hearing this from my PIL, I prepared myself along with my parents. I suspected Amelia would next try to rely on them. Worried about how furious I was, Ava rushed over to be with me. This happened 2 days after we had received the call from my PIL. While discussing our next steps, we heard an engine sound that we had become very familiar with. It was unmistakably Mason's car. I was surprised they arrived so soon, but it was a relief not to have to wait for days. First, I asked my mom to handle them through the doorbell intercom without opening the door. Amelia appeared slightly haggard through the intercom.
Grandma, it's Amelia. There's been a terrible misunderstanding with Mom, and we had a really bad fight. Please, can you help mediate between us?
Hearing her call it a misunderstanding ignited a fury in me that completely overshadowed any sadness. Ava fanned me with her hands, trying to calm me down.
Evelyn, calm down. Come on, let's go.
Breathing heavily, I positioned myself by the front door. Amelia must have been waiting for the door to unlock, unaware that I was inside. At Ava's signal, she quickly opened the door.
Grandma! Mom!
Amelia's smile froze the moment she saw me. In hindsight, she should have expected to find me at my parents' home. Her lack of foresight was astonishing.
Get out!
As I shouted, Ava swiftly closed and locked the door again. Amelia and Mason seemed to be in a panic outside. I shouted at the top of my lungs, making sure they could hear me clearly through the door.
I no longer have a daughter. Someone who tells their sick father to get lost isn't the precious, sweet daughter I loved. You're a stranger. Get out and never come back.
There was one thing I held back from saying. A thought I had to suppress as a mother. I wish I had never given birth to you. No matter how much I felt it, I couldn't let myself say it. How much time passed, I don't know. Eventually, we heard the engine sound again, and the two of them drove away. Instinctively, I knew we would never meet again. I've lost both Aiden and Amelia. I wondered how Amelia would feel about today when she became a mother herself, when her children reached their rebellious phase, and when she grew old. As I collapsed in tears, Ava embraced me. My parents were also tearing up, comforting me. Though I had abandoned Amelia and Mason as my family, I found solace in knowing that there were still loved ones who remained by my side.
Hello, I have some shocking news. Amelia and Mason have divorced. They seemed so close, but now they've split.
Ava told me over the phone a few days later. Ava sounded surprised, but I wasn't shocked at all. It was only natural that two such self-centered people wouldn't last long together. Amelia had become an outcast even among our relatives, and she was now alone. She had tried working at a pub for a while, but that didn't last, and she's been jumping from one job to another. She probably wanted to escape from the cold stares in our hometown, but without money from the divorce and being cut off from me, she couldn't afford to move away. She was likely to face tough times for a while. Amelia used to be so beautiful. Now she looks completely different. She doesn't wear makeup, so her eyebrows are gone. She's like a different person, Ava mentioned. Even hearing this, I felt no pity. All I could think was that she deserved her struggles. I realized I was truly over it, feeling detached from the situation. Thanks for the update. But I don't need any more. She's not my daughter anymore. I should have realized it sooner. Do you think it would have turned out differently if I had raised her differently? Ava pondered for a moment, carefully choosing her words. I'm sorry, I don't know. That's a hard question for me to answer. Maybe you could ask Aiden when you meet him again someday. He truly loved you, Evelyn. No matter how long it takes, he'll be there to welcome you when the time comes. Ava's words touched me deeply, understanding me so well. I accepted her words and thanked her. Since our encounter at my parents' home, Amelia had not contacted me directly. I had blocked her, and she hadn't reached out to my parents-in-law either. It was likely we would never interact again. Except perhaps if one of us were to pass away. I heard that Mason had also disappeared from our hometown. It turned out that his parents, Liam and Olivia, were so furious about the whole situation that they sent him to a distant construction site job with accommodation. Rumor had it that he wouldn't be able to return for at least 10 years. I hoped he would face his own struggles and come to reflect on his actions. Hey, Aiden. Where should we live next? I'd like a place with a nice view, I said to his photograph. Aiden's smiling photo gazed back at me with those kind eyes, unchanged. Despite wanting to move far away, I couldn't find the ideal place and continued living at my parents' home for over 6 months. During this time, something unexpected happened. A letter from Aiden arrived. It was a letter Aiden had entrusted to my PIL before he passed away, asking them to give it to me once things had settled. The incident with Amelia had delayed its delivery, but they finally brought it to me. Oh, Aiden. Seeing Aiden's familiar handwriting made my nose tingle. The slightly shaky lines indicated that he had written it while his illness was already advanced. Aiden's loving letter read, Evelyn, thank you for walking this path with me until the end. I may not have been the perfect husband or dad, but having you by my side made me incredibly happy. I want you to enjoy the rest of your life for yourself. Don't let anyone hold you back, leave any burdens behind. Please live a life full of shining happiness. I love you. I read the letter over and over, tracing the words with my fingers. As I read it again and again, memories of my days with Aiden came flooding back. Because of his illness, he didn't leave much in terms of material wealth, but we had countless memories together. I know, I want to climb the mountain we hiked during our early married days. The idea suddenly struck me, and I began preparing for the trip. Since I quit my part-time job to move, I had plenty of time. Moreover, fortunately, my parents were well off, so I didn't have to worry about my current living situation. Now, reminiscing about the trip to Switzerland with Aiden during our youth, I am traveling overseas with Ava. We went to Switzerland and took the mountain train to the top station. Standing in the same unchanging landscape, I felt a sense of renewal as the wind blew. We've been talking lately about moving somewhere with my parents. How about Seattle? It's a place with many newcomers, and it seems like a fun place to live. Dreaming aloud while feeling the cool Swiss breeze. I noted how the air seemed to have a different scent, perhaps because it was so far from America. Ava laughed heartily and responded, "The place I live in is pretty nice too, cool weather. There are quite a few older folks, so your parents might find it comfortable." Ava lives in Port Townsend. I could imagine it being a quiet and lovely place. Thinking about whether to live alone or with my parents, and where to settle, I felt a sense of excitement. I decided to discuss it well with my parents to ensure they would be happy with the decision.
I want to give back a lot more than I ever have, cherish my friends more, and maybe start another part-time job.
The sunrise from the mountain top was beautiful, and I felt a sense of a bright future. Believing in the shining days of happiness that Aiden's letter had promised, I resolved to live my life to the fullest from now on.
I've asked Taylor to take care of the house, but I told her to call a helper if there's any trouble.
I'm only giving her the bare minimum responsibilities. Well then, I'm off. My son Ryan said as he left for his 5-day business trip early in the morning, carrying his luggage. I watched his back as he walked away and started preparing breakfast. Cooking has been a struggle since my stroke, but thanks to researching simple recipes and easy housekeeping methods, I think I can manage somehow. Taylor, my son's wife, and I ate breakfast quietly together, and then I got ready to go to rehab. After a while, I heard the sound of her leaving the house, having finished getting ready before me.
"She's off to play already, huh? I knew this would happen,"
I thought to myself. She puts on a good face in front of Ryan, but the truth is she doesn't do any housework at all and just goes out to have fun. Amazed but not surprised, I headed to the rehabilitation facility. When I returned home after finishing my rehab, for some reason, the front door wouldn't open. I couldn't stand it any longer and rang the doorbell a few times. The door opened quietly, but for some reason, the chain lock was on as if to refuse entry.
"Hey, Taylor, you're home, aren't you? Can't you let me in?"
I asked, bewildered. Laughter could be heard from inside.
"You can barely do any housework, so you're just in the way if you're in the house. If you want to sleep, there's a sleeping bag Ryan used to use in the garage.
Why don't you use that?" she said mockingly and slammed the front door shut with force, kicking me out. I couldn't comprehend what was happening or why things had turned out this way. But then it occurred to me that this might be an opportunity in disguise. At that moment, I sorted out my feelings and made a decision.
"All right. I won't go into the house. But don't complain about when or where I sleep,"
I said to the firmly closed front door, not caring if she heard me or not, and slowly walked alone down the dark street. My name is Samantha. A 55-year-old housewife living with my son Ryan and his wife Taylor. Before getting married, I had a normal job working as an average office worker. While working at the company, there were encounters, but few romantic ones. On weekends and days off, I spent my time partying, introduced by a colleague who joined the company at the same time as me. That time, we gathered at a restaurant near the station, 4 women including myself, my colleague and her friends, and 4 men. One was running late due to work and was on his way. When my friend and I arrived at the restaurant, only 3 men were there. 5 minutes later, as we were talking and eating, a man in a suit arrived.
"I'm Patrick. Sorry I'm late,"
he said. Compared to the other men, his face was kind-looking rather than handsome, and he wasn't particularly tall. However, as I sat across from him and we talked, I learned about his hobbies and his considerate personality. The more we talked, the more interested I became in him. The other members seemed to be aiming for the most handsome man in the group. Normally, I would have set my sights on the same person as everyone else, but today I felt strange and couldn't take my eyes off him.
"Does Samantha really want that guy? that average-looking, ordinary man?
The opinions were a bit negative, or something like that, perhaps because my choice was so unexpected. But no matter how many negative opinions were expressed, my feelings didn't change.
All right, if Samantha is that serious about it, we'll support her too.
As we were discussing what to do next after finishing the first round of drinks, I seized the opportunity when the other members were distracting the men and pulled Patrick away from the conversation to a slightly secluded spot.
I'm sorry, I think I'm a bit drunk. Could you come with me to the nearby restroom?
On cue, my colleagues urged the men to go ahead to the next bar, leaving Patrick and me alone.
Are you okay? If you're feeling sick, let's get you to the restroom quickly for now,
Patrick said with concern in his voice.
Actually, I'm not feeling sick or drunk at all. I'm sorry for deceiving you like this, but I really wanted to be alone with you,
I confessed, feeling a twinge of guilt for my little white lie.
So you're not feeling unwell? That's a relief. I was worried about what to do if you were really feeling sick. Anyway, I'm glad you're not feeling ill.
Even though I had tricked him into being alone with me, Patrick didn't scold me for lying. Instead, he was genuinely worried about my well-being. His kindness made me feel even more apologetic, but at the same time, my affection for him grew.
I'm sorry, but if it's okay with you, would you like to start over and have a drink with just the two of us?
I asked tentatively. For a moment, he looked taken aback by my invitation, but perhaps it was just his way of hiding his shyness. With an embarrassed expression, he accepted my offer. From there, we moved to a quieter setting like a bar, enjoying our time alone together. We talked about each other, sometimes listening to each other's work complaints, gradually closing the distance between our hearts. Feeling pleasantly tipsy, I stumbled, and Patrick caught me. In that moment, the way he looked at me was too much to resist. I pressed my lips to his, and we became one. A year later, despite our colleagues saying our relationship wouldn't last long, we brushed off their comments and finally got married. For a while after our wedding, we continued working as a dual-income couple. But when Ryan was born, Patrick expressed his wish for me to prioritize childcare and household duties. Taking his words to heart, I quit my job and devoted myself to supporting our family at home as a housewife. I hoped these happy times would last forever. However, that blissful period came crashing down with a loud noise one day. It was 3 years ago. After graduating from college, Ryan got a job at a local company. While working diligently as a full-fledged member of society, he married a woman named Taylor, and it had already been 2 years. Just when I thought even greater happiness was in store for our growing family, Patrick was involved in a traffic accident on his way to work and passed away. It happened right after we were talking about how he would likely live a long life, given his energetic nature. The incident was so sudden that, honestly, I couldn't believe it until I saw Patrick's deceased body. Apparently, I kept mumbling to Ryan that he must have just been injured. I don't even remember that myself, but they say the moment I saw him at the hospital, I let out a loud cry and broke down in tears. For a while, I couldn't recover from his death and spent my days in a daze. But as I looked at his portrait, smiling at the camera, I thought I saw a momentary flicker of sadness on his face.
You're right, absolutely right. If I keep crying forever, you won't be able to rest peacefully in heaven, will you? I understand. I'll live strongly for the both of us,
I declared, feeling like he had passed the baton of vitality back to me once more. Fortunately, thanks to the money he had been saving at the bank for our retirement and the insurance he had taken out in case of emergencies, we had enough savings to live comfortably as long as we didn't indulge in luxuries. Moreover, Ryan, worried about me, suggested that the three of us, him, Taylor, and myself, live together as a family. And now, here we are, living under one roof. Ryan worked from early morning until late at night, and Taylor often went out with her friends who lived nearby. The two of them were rarely home, leaving me to handle all the household chores single-handedly. However, the joy of being able to support my family outweighed the challenges, so it wasn't too difficult for me. In fact, I found happiness in being useful to my family. But there was also a concern gnawing at me. It was about Taylor. Like me, Taylor had been living with Ryan as a housewife until now. When I started living with them, I wondered how she would manage her life. To my surprise, she neither took on a part-time job nor helped with the housework. Instead, she spent her time freely hanging out with her friends in the neighborhood. Ryan probably knew that she was just playing around all the time, but for some reason, he never scolded her. On the contrary, he even gave her money. I found myself unable to comment on her behavior for quite some time. You see, during the family meeting for Ryan's wedding, I met Taylor's mom, Olivia, for the first time. We hit it off, bonding over the shared circumstance of having lost our husbands. Since then, we've become close friends. Because of this, I haven't been able to say anything to avoid causing unnecessary worry for her as well.
Using your mind is more exhausting than using your body, isn't it?
I thought to myself, feeling the mental strain of an inexplicable frustration and the pain of not being able to confide in anyone about my troubles. Then, one day, it happened out of the blue. As usual, I prepared breakfast for Ryan and Taylor and saw Ryan off first.
I'm going out with my friends again today, so please take care of the house. I'll be back in the evening,
Taylor said before leaving shortly after Ryan had left for work. Watching Taylor's retreating figure, my day began. I cleaned the sink and its surroundings, and in between, I proceeded with the housework in the order I had predetermined, such as doing the laundry. After washing the family's bedding and vacuuming, I lifted 2 full garbage bags to take them outside. At that moment, my vision suddenly blurred and a strong dizziness overtook me. I lost my balance and collapsed on the spot with a dull thud. When I woke up, an unfamiliar ceiling stretched out before my eyes. My body felt heavy from the neck down, and I couldn't move properly. Somehow managing to move just my neck, I looked around and noticed an 4 connected to my arm and a machine measuring my heart rate. It seemed I was in a hospital. Perhaps someone had noticed something was wrong and called an ambulance for me. As I was trying to assess the situation with my freshly awakened mind, a nurse came in. Seeing that I had regained consciousness, she went to call the doctor. The doctor arrived, and I received an explanation of what had happened to my body and why I was in the hospital. "It's a stroke," he said. A stroke. The intense dizziness that caused me to lose consciousness was apparently one of the symptoms of a stroke, likely caused by my chronic high blood pressure. It turned out that a neighbor who had visited by chance called the ambulance for me. They heard a loud noise from inside the house, and since the door was unlocked, they entered to find me collapsed on the floor. The heaviness I had felt in my body since waking up was likely caused by the stroke. As time passed, sensation returned to my left side, but my right side still wouldn't move as I wanted it to. According to the doctor, when I collapsed, my brain suffered a strong impact, damaging the area responsible for controlling the right side of my body, leaving it paralyzed. However, with rehabilitation, I could apparently regain at least the minimal movement necessary for daily life, even if it wouldn't be the same as before. So, I decided to focus on rehab during my hospital stay. A month later, with blood, sweat, and tears, I continued my rehabilitation and somehow managed to walk slowly on my own. I would have to keep going to the hospital and rehab to treat the paralysis on my right side, but considering it was to avoid living an inconvenienced life in the future, it was no big deal. During my hospitalization, Ryan was busy with work and sent me a text apologizing I couldn't come to visit you, along with words of concern. The ones who came to pick me up when I was discharged were Ryan and Taylor, who hadn't visited me even once. Thank you for coming to get me. Was work okay? I asked Ryan.
It's fine for a day or so. I took care of various things while I couldn't come to see you,
he replied. Samantha, are you all right? Taylor chimed in from behind Ryan. For now, I decided not to think about her. While Ryan was loading the luggage I had used during my hospital stay into the car, she just watched, fiddling with her smartphone. I had recently started to wonder what my son saw in someone like her.
Come on, let's go home, Mom. To make up for all the care you've given us until now, I'll be the one helping you out from now on, so don't worry.
Ryan reassured me. Even though I was finally going home after being discharged, I couldn't help but feel a little anxious. However, Ryan's words cleared away that anxiety like a single ray of light piercing through my darkened heart.
I'm sorry, Ryan, Taylor. I appreciate it.
I expressed my heartfelt gratitude. Ryan responded with a smile, but out of the corner of my eye, I could see Taylor's expression looking somewhat displeased. And so, I finally returned home. Thanks to rehab, although I was still slightly lacking, I could do things for myself as long as I took my time. Therefore, I don't think I caused too much trouble for the two of them. The only times I needed their help were with difficult tasks for me now, like carrying heavy objects or reaching things in high places. Other than that, I tried to do as much as I could on my own. Dissatisfied with only moving during rehab, I did housework with the sole desire to return to a state as close to my former self as possible. Perhaps out of consideration for me, Ryan started coming home at 6 p.m. instead of working from early morning to late at night as he used to. He also began actively helping with household chores, saying he hadn't been able to help out until now.
Mom, I just need to add the seasonings as written on the memo, right?
He asked, referring to the memo I had written while cooking, unfamiliar with determining the flavors himself. Sometimes he mistook the types of seasonings and messed up. But he seemed to enjoy the challenge, thinking positively that failures are a part of trying new things. As for Taylor, although she stopped coming home late after hanging out as she used to, in line with Ryan's earlier return, she still went out to play when he inevitably had to work late. Ryan probably thought she was taking care of me, but I knew it would be troublesome if I told him the truth. It wasn't that I was being considerate, but given the current situation, I wanted to avoid troublesome things as much as possible. One night, while somehow managing to do the housework as usual with his help, he told me something. Due to work circumstances, he had no choice but to go on a 5-day business trip. During the trip, he said, "I'll leave the house to Taylor for now." However, he didn't know that she gleefully went out to play every time he was away from home for work or other reasons. Taylor probably put on a good face in front of Ryan, but after he left for the business trip, she would likely not do anything around the house as before. Instead, she might spend even more time going out to play and possibly not come home at all. More than worrying about myself, I was anxious about what might happen in the coming days. With that unease in my heart, time passed, and the day arrived when he was leaving for his trip.
I've asked Taylor to take care of the house, but I told her to call a helper if there's any trouble. I'm only giving her the bare minimum responsibilities.
Well then, I'm off, Ryan said as he left early in the morning with his luggage for the 5-day trip. Watching Ryan's back as he walked away, I started preparing breakfast for two, thinking Taylor would probably eat too. Cooking has been a struggle since my body became like this, but thanks to researching simple recipes and easy housekeeping methods to support my family, I think I can manage somehow. In my current condition, using a knife is dangerous, but I was amazed to discover that with the latest kitchen gadgets, I could cook without using a knife. At this rate, I might not even need Taylor's help. I'll try to do as much as I can on my own. Just as I made that resolution, Taylor woke up from the bedroom, rubbing her sleepy eyes.
"Oh, Ryan already left?"
she asked.
"Yes, he's gone. Let's do our best for these 5 days, Taylor. By the way, are you going to have breakfast?"
I replied. "I'll eat," she said curtly. And so began our temporary 5-day life together, just the two of us. We ate breakfast quietly, and while I was getting ready to go to rehab, I heard the sound of Taylor leaving the house in a hurry, having finished getting ready before me.
She's off to play already, huh? I knew this would happen,
I thought to myself. I took a taxi to the rehabilitation facility, and after finishing my 2-hour rehab session, I went to a cafe adjacent to a nearby library to read and drink coffee. Before I knew it, it was evening by the time I started heading home. When I got home, for some reason, the door wouldn't open. I rang the doorbell a few times, but not understanding the situation, I couldn't stand it any longer and contacted Taylor. Then I heard footsteps from inside, and the house key turned quietly, but for some reason, the chain lock was on the door as if to refuse entry.
"Hey, Taylor? You're home, aren't you? Can't you let me in?"
I asked, bewildered, calling out to Taylor, who was probably on the other side of the door. Laughter could be heard from inside.
"Oh my, Samantha, what's the matter? Did you hit your head when you got injured and mistake where you're supposed to return to?"
Taylor asked mockingly, making me feel a momentary terror. What on earth was this person saying? At that time, I couldn't understand the true meaning behind her words.
"I'm not mistaken. Come on, let me in quickly. What on earth are you trying to do?"
I demanded.
"You can barely do any housework, so you're just in the way if you're in the house. If you want to sleep, there's a sleeping bag Ryan used to use in the garage.
Why don't you use that?" she said with a mocking face, then slammed the front door shut with force, kicking me out. I couldn't comprehend what was happening or why things had turned out this way. But then it occurred to me that this might be an opportunity in disguise. She had never done any housework and just played around until now, spending time as if she had been home when Ryan came back from work. I had endured it until now to avoid causing unnecessary worry for my good friend Olivia, but honestly, I had reached my limit. At that moment, I sorted out my feelings and made a decision.
"All right. I won't go into the house. But don't complain about when or where I sleep,"
I said to the firmly closed front door, not caring if she heard me or not, and slowly walked alone down the road at dusk, the sun having completely set. I realized now that I had left my phone and everything else except my wallet at home, thinking my only plan for the day was rehab. With this, I had no way to contact Ryan. Since I couldn't get in touch with him, I stopped a taxi that happened to be passing by and asked to be taken to a certain place. After a 20-minute drive, the place I was heading to was Olivia's house, where I had greeted her and visited a few times before. I thought it might be a bother to go at this hour, but with nowhere else to go and believing she was the only one who would directly understand my current situation, I came prepared for the rudeness and inconvenience.
"Huh? Samantha, what's wrong? Why are you here so late at night? Oh, by the way, is your injury okay?
Could you please let me inside the house for now? I'll explain the situation properly later," Olivia asked, surprised by my sudden visit but warmly welcoming me and inviting me into her house. I loved the atmosphere of this home, which retained an old-fashioned charm and felt somehow nostalgic and comfortable. No, that didn't matter now. With her help, I was somehow led to the living room, and despite the late hour, she even served me coffee and entertained me. She seemed to have contacted Taylor after seeing me, but apparently, Taylor's phone was turned off and she couldn't reach her.
So, what on earth happened? I can't get in touch with Taylor either, and seeing you here at this hour without any luggage, did something happen at home?
Olivia asked. I confided in her all the anxieties I had been holding in my heart until now. How Taylor, since getting married, didn't help with the house at all, how she was always going out to play while Ryan was at work, and how her behavior hadn't changed at all even after I became like this. And how I was driven out of the house by that very Taylor. I laid bare to her everything I had endured, saying, keeping it pushed down inside me. She seemed to have had no idea that her daughter was living like that at her husband's parents' home. From visiting a few times, I realized that she was a worrier when it came to Taylor. She had asked me several times before if she was doing okay at home, but each time I had brushed it off. However, with this incident, I decided to confide in her, thinking that if I kept minding her tendency to worry, my own well-being would be in danger. Olivia seemed shocked, unsure if what I had told her was true, unable to process it in her mind. While she collected her thoughts, I decided to borrow her phone and call Ryan to explain the situation. Although it was already late at night and I thought it might interfere with his work, I felt I had to tell him today, so I called Ryan with a glimmer of hope.
Hello,
he answered.
Ryan? Is now a good time?
Actually, I recounted the day's events to Ryan in order.
What? No way, Taylor did that? And she never did anything around the house until now? She always boasted about working hard, but it was all a lie?
It seemed he had only been aware of her usual behavior through her own words and had completely believed her convenient lies. I could sense his agitation even over the phone. After a few seconds of silence, as if sorting out the information in his mind, he said he would leave his work to a colleague for now and, after getting approval from the other party due to the emergency, he would come back in the morning. Hanging up the phone and heading to the living room where Olivia was waiting, I found her sitting with a stern expression, unlike before.
Samantha, I want to talk to Taylor directly. I want to hear the truth from her mouth, she said.
You're right.
I understand. It seems Ryan will also be coming back temporarily from his business trip tomorrow morning, so let's go to her together,
I replied. And so it was decided that Olivia would join the discussion with Ryan tomorrow. Apologizing for the inconvenience at such a late hour, I was about to borrow Olivia's phone to call a taxi to take me to a hotel for the night. However, Olivia suggested I stay at her house, saying it would be a waste of money. I told her I couldn't possibly impose on her for a place to sleep after already causing her trouble, but with Olivia's insistence that we were going together anyway, I ended up staying for just one night. The next morning, Olivia drove us to the station to pick up Ryan, and the three of us went to our home to talk to Taylor. Since I had left my keys inside the house, Ryan used his key to unlock the front door, and we returned home for the first time in several hours. Upon entering, we noticed a pair of men's sneakers among Taylor's and our shoes. Thinking it couldn't be, we saw the living room door slightly ajar and burst in, the three of us. There, on the living room sofa, we saw Taylor snuggled up with an unknown man.
What the?
Unable to contain his anger at the man sleeping nonchalantly even in this situation, Ryan shook him awake and dragged him off the sofa. Pulled down and slammed face first onto the floor, the man finally woke up, confused about what was happening. He looked around and seemed to notice our presence.
Huh?
Who are you? He asked.
I'm the husband of the woman you were sleeping with,
Ryan replied. We had the two of them get dressed and demanded an explanation from them about this situation. Taylor remained silent, perhaps irritated by this sudden situation. Instead, her lover began to explain how they had ended up like this. They had met on a dating app a few months ago, and their affair began in a drunken moment when they were out drinking together. From there, they started dating, leading to their current relationship. He himself had no idea Taylor was married. She had apparently taken off her ring and told him she was single, with no boyfriend or husband. As her lover revealed the truth, Taylor, who had maintained her silence, gradually clouded over, and beads of sweat formed on her forehead.
Why did you tattle on me? Everything was going well until now, but you've ruined it all, haven't you?
Taylor shouted furiously. Olivia, her mother, slapped her cheek while shedding large tears.
So it was all a lie that you were too busy with housework to even work part-time. I heard from Samantha yesterday. Even when Samantha was having a hard time, you were just out playing, and you used the money I gave you because you couldn't earn it yourself to play around with your lover.
Hearing Olivia's words, Taylor's sharp gaze turned to me again. Even though it was her own responsibility, she glared at me with malicious eyes, as if to say it was clearly my fault. But Ryan stepped in between our gazes and glared back at Taylor.
Taylor, I can't go on with you anymore. I've been working desperately from morning till night to make money for our family, and this is how you use that money? You've got to be kidding me. I want a divorce.
Unable to contain his anger at her betrayal, he brought up divorce in a heavy, low voice. Shaken by the word divorce, Taylor clung to Ryan's feet and screamed desperately.
Don't abandon me!
But of course, not even we, let alone Ryan, were willing to forgive her. No matter how much she cried or apologized, her fate was sealed in Ryan's and our minds. She had to atone for what she had done. At this point, for some reason, Taylor started to argue back.
But where's the proof that I was really having an affair? You're talking as if I've been cheating all along, but there's no such evidence anywhere, is there?
Her excuses were so pathetic that I could only be amazed. Ryan, who had been regaining his composure, seemed even angrier at her excuses. I delivered the final blow to Taylor.
I have proof. Recently, someone at the rehab facility I've been going to recommended that I secretly install indoor security cameras. Today's cameras are convenient because you can check the footage on your smartphone.
Saying that, I opened the dedicated app on my phone, which I had left untouched, to check the security camera footage and showed her the recordings from last night until now. It showed Taylor on the phone with someone after she had kicked me out, and then her lover coming to the house, embracing passionately, and kissing repeatedly. Other footage also contained several statements and behaviors that confirmed Taylor's infidelity. She had complained that my injury made it difficult for her to find time to meet her lover. She had planned to kick me out so she could invite him over during Ryan's business trip. The evidence, including audio, was rock solid.
You can't talk your way out of this one. You said there was no evidence of cheating, but your claim has ended up being meaningless.
Ryan said. Yeah, so what if I cheated? What's wrong with that?
You're never home because of work, and being cooped up in the house with Samantha all the time is suffocating. I haven't done anything wrong,
she admitted, brazenly confirming her infidelity up until now. Apparently, she had spent all the money she had received from Ryan and Olivia on buying things for her lover and going out to eat with him. Not wanting to even breathe the same air as Taylor, who had fully admitted to cheating, we quickly kicked her and her lover out.
We'll talk more about this later,
Ryan stressed. She didn't respond to his words as she left, but later, she came with her lover who had been in the house, and discussions were held with a lawyer present. The footage from the security cameras I had installed was established as evidence to validate the divorce, and Ryan and Taylor's divorce was granted. Furthermore, compensation and settlement money were demanded from Taylor and her lover, who had been cheating in the divorce trial. But Taylor showed no signs of remorse, not just for this incident, but for the countless troubles she had caused in the past. Fed up with her antics, Ryan and Olivia decided to cut all ties with her completely.
"Don't you dare come near us ever again."
Despite being abandoned by Ryan, who had loved her passionately, and Olivia, her own mother, Taylor seemed utterly unfazed. If anything, she appeared almost relieved as she sat through the discussions with the lawyers and us, a serene expression on her face. Now single, Taylor soon discovered that her lover had never harbored any romantic feelings for her. To him, she was nothing more than a convenient plaything. As soon as he had paid off his share of the settlement, he vanished from her life without a trace. Accustomed to a life of pampering and indulgence, Taylor found herself woefully unprepared for the harsh realities of fending for herself. The meager sum she had left was hardly enough to maintain a decent standard of living, forcing her to settle for a dilapidated apartment. On top of that, she was saddled with the burden of paying the court-ordered alimony from the divorce, which meant she had to work herself to the bone from dawn till dusk just to stay afloat. Ryan, on the other hand, found himself with a bit more financial wiggle room after the divorce. Freed from the shackles of his previous workaholic lifestyle, he now made a point of coming home early in the evenings to help out with the household chores. His dedication and support allowed me to focus more intently on my rehabilitation. My friendship with Olivia remained as strong as ever. Even though she had cut ties with her daughter, Taylor, she made it clear that her bond with me was a separate matter entirely. She chose to believe in me over her own flesh and blood, and for that, I will be forever grateful. With Ryan's unwavering commitment to keeping our home running smoothly and her constant companionship during my therapy sessions, I found myself regaining more mobility and independence than ever before. These days, my greatest joy comes from the simple pleasures of grabbing a coffee or indulging in a bit of retail therapy with my best friend, Olivia, after a long day of rehabilitation. Life is good, and I couldn't be happier.
Being called by my name just gets my heart racing. It's incredibly thrilling.
In the dead of night, I stumbled upon Tanner and Rebecca, frolicking in the back seat of a car in the garage. Shocked by the unbelievable scene before me, I locked the two of them in the garage and headed back to my parents' house.
I want to show those two, who've been making a fool of me, what real hell feels like.
Back at my parents' house, I explained the situation to my parents and another person, asking for their cooperation in my revenge. Everyone agreed, and I resolved to make Tanner and Rebecca experience true hell. My name is Natasha. I'm a newlywed. I met my husband, Tanner, back in our student days. We were classmates in high school, worked together on committees, and had a few interactions. But that was the extent of our relationship. I never imagined that someone like him would approach me now, as adults.
"Natasha, I really do love you," he said.
Our relationship began right after graduating high school. During our final cultural festival as seniors, Tanner started to get involved with me, and we began to interact as friends. Despite barely knowing each other, he started pursuing me relentlessly right after graduation. I couldn't understand why a guy who was so popular among girls during our school days would be interested in someone like me. Even when I asked him why, he would simply say he was smitten, never providing a concrete reason. Suspicious of his motives, I spent 6 months investigating, but couldn't find any convincing reasons, and eventually, overwhelmed by his persistence, I accepted his proposal.
If I just wanted to date and ditch someone, I wouldn't put in all this effort. Can't you trust me already? I truly love you, Natasha, he said.
Hearing those words, I began to consider trusting him. But as a novice in love, it took a lot of courage for me to date someone as popular as him. That's when I turned to my older sister, Rebecca, for advice. Rebecca was beautiful and stylish, rumored to be among the most popular in school, as I heard from her classmates. I thought consulting with Rebecca, who had plenty of experience in love, would help me find the answer. When I talked to her about it, her encouragement felt like a gentle push forward.
Just for dating, a playboy wouldn't spend 6 months. I really think Tanner is serious about you, Natasha. Why don't you accept it?
Rebecca's words convinced me to start a relationship with Tanner. A year went by. In the beginning, Tanner was incredibly kind. He treated me like a princess. He took me to my favorite places, and every anniversary, birthday, and event was celebrated with a surprise, making it feel like a dream. For someone inexperienced in love like me, all these felt like fairy tale moments, and I was thrilled to have taken the chance with him. Until the day we decided to get married.
What's with this filthy room? I like things clean. You know what happens if you turn this place into a dump, right?
After deciding to get married, we bought a new house. Tanner worked as a laborer in his father's company, earning around $40,000 a year. He didn't have the means to buy a house. Yet, disliking used things, Tanner insisted I stretch our finances to purchase a new home. Calling household management a hassle, he dumped all responsibilities on me, living freely himself.
This is your house too, so I wish you'd help with the cleaning. I have a job too, so let's support each other, okay? You can at least tidy up, can't you?
I work as a nurse with irregular shifts. Tanner actually spends more time at home and earns $30,000 less than I do. Despite the significant differences in time and money, he doesn't cooperate at all. I cover all household expenses, while Tanner only spends his salary on leisure and consumables. Before marriage, he spoke of mutual support and striving together. But after moving in, Tanner changed completely. He became a total freeloader. I once tried to get him to cook, but the taste and his knife skills were disastrous. The house ended up a mess, and I gave up on having him cook. If I let him do the laundry, he'd throw everything in together, causing shrinkage and color bleeding. He was far from trustworthy. Even Mary, my mother-in-law, had concerns, but I never anticipated it being this bad until I saw it with my own eyes.
You're the one who told me not to do housework, right? Now you're making it sound like it's my fault when you start getting called out?
Initially, I patiently taught him household chores, but Tanner was short-tempered and prone to violence. Just mentioning household tasks triggered such reactions, and out of fear, I once said I'd handle everything myself to avoid his outbursts. But I'm only human. Nursing is many times harder than people think. My stamina has declined since my early 20s, making it tough to balance home life with work. And on top of that, the household chores have more than doubled compared to when I lived alone. I often wish I had extra hands. Is it so wrong to ask for help in such circumstances? Tanner becomes immediately enraged, showing his aggressive side whenever his sore spots are poked. Once, when I dared to stand up to him, he threw things against the wall and almost injured me. I've been scared of him and even considered divorce, but each time he would become uncharacteristically kind, showering me with love as if he were a different person. I'm sorry, Natasha. I'll never do this again. I truly value you. Please don't leave me. I genuinely love you. I can't live without you. Rarely feeling needed by others, I couldn't dismiss such affection from Tanner and saw no alternative but to forgive him. He was the first person I truly loved. I couldn't envision a life with good encounters after losing him. Such thoughts were reinforced by various things said by Rebecca and Tanner during our relationship.
No one else would put up with someone like you, Natasha.
If you leave Tanner, you might spend your life alone. At that time, I was completely dominated by the thought that no one but Tanner could love someone like me, a belief instilled by his manipulative words. Even when I thought about leaving, memories of our relationship and Tanner's need for me held me back. It's like the saying, the one who falls in love loses. I was completely ensnared by Tanner's manipulative tactics.
I want to support you if I can, but housework is just not my thing. I'm counting on you for that. Please don't say such sad things. I'll try to do what I can.
He probably noticed my fear after his outburst. As soon as he approached me, he embraced me and gently stroked my hair to calm me. Tanner was skilled at using both the carrot and the stick, always making me feel needed just when I thought all was lost. For someone shy and introverted like me, being needed and loved by someone was a way to affirm my existence. Tanner had great communication skills and was an observant person. He was adept at manipulating someone to the brink of life and death. I was frequently bullied during my school days, which affected my self-esteem. Tanner exploited this, convincing me he was the only one who needed me. He claimed to love and accept even my flaws. Little did I know at the time, this was all part of his manipulative tactics. To be honest, it never even crossed my mind. Until the day I witnessed that scene. As our first wedding anniversary approached, encouraged by my parents, we decided to have a wedding ceremony with Tanner.
Rebecca had her wedding at a garden, but where do you plan to have yours? Maybe a church wedding would be nice?
The decision to have a ceremony was partly due to my parents' suggestion. Dad and Mom have always been deeply concerned about me. They know I'm the kind to care for others, sometimes at my own expense, readily sacrificing myself for the sake of others. When I became a nurse, they worried if I could truly handle it.
You have a kind heart that tends to overdo things. Remember, it's not good to always put others first. Take care of yourself too.
Despite their worries, they were my biggest supporters when I decided to become a nurse. Dad's concern also came to the forefront when it came to my marriage. Usually not one to meddle, Dad for the first time wanted to have a serious talk with Tanner and invited him over.
Natasha is our treasure. If anything happens to her, I'll never forgive you. Are you prepared to take care of her?
Dad didn't hesitate to intimidate Tanner, who seemed nervous. But Tanner didn't flinch and insisted earnestly that he wanted to marry me.
I also want a solemn atmosphere for the wedding, so maybe we should look for a church. I know I've been a burden to Natasha, so I want to make the main event especially wonderful for her.
Lost in thought, Tanner's voice brought me back to reality. Seeing Tanner smile sheepishly made my heart race. I never imagined he thought that way. Partly because his words and his everyday actions are so different. I wish he would be more kind on regular days and not just on special occasions. If we could just eat together, watch movies in the living room and laugh, I'd be so happy. Why does Tanner have to say such awful things? Does he really love me? Does he really need me? Having little experience with relationships, I kept wondering if something was wrong with me. Maybe Tanner's lack of desire is because I'm lacking in some way. I must try harder. I convinced myself, suppressing any thoughts of confronting Tanner. Contrary to my feelings, Dad and Mom seemed impressed by Tanner's words, looking at him kindly.
You're lucky, Natasha, to marry such a good man.
My parents thought Tanner was a good husband. And at that time, so did I. It's true, Natasha is so lucky. She's not good at much besides housework. Are you sure you're not missing anything, Tanner? Rebecca, who happened to be there, sat next to Tanner without hesitation. She flirtatiously placed her hand on Tanner's knee and looked up at him.
No. That's not true at all.
Rebecca is the opposite of me, sociable and beautiful. She's always fashionable and brand conscious. And thanks to her husband who runs an IT company, she lives a lavish lifestyle. Rebecca often looked down on me, belittling me to elevate herself. But she too was adept at getting her way, manipulating me skillfully. Back then, I didn't realize I was being used by Rebecca. I felt happy to be relied on and pampered.
Is that so, Natasha? You too shouldn't let go of such a good man so easily either. After all, you're just a burden with no redeeming qualities.
Rebecca! Such mockery was a routine occurrence. She used her pretty face and tears as weapons, pushing people away from me. Everyone seemed to side with Rebecca. The only exception was my parents. Mom always scolds Rebecca sharply whenever she mocks me. Seeing no way to turn the situation in her favor, Rebecca quickly leaves the scene, but the pain in my heart lingers. What was a joyful moment is ruined by Rebecca's words. Tanner, along with Dad and Mom, apologizes, but he just laughs it off, saying it's nothing. Deep down, I wish for some comforting words, but I don't have the courage to ask for such audacity. It's my fault, as always, I tell myself, accustomed to resolving things on my own. Time passed and it was now the day before the wedding. The ceremony was set to be held at a church, and today, Rebecca was visiting my house. She said it was closer to the venue from our place. Let's call it a night since it's early tomorrow. I'm borrowing your bed. After having dinner and a shower, we enjoyed some drinks. It was past 10 p.m., and we were all feeling the effects, so we decided to get some sleep. I would share the bed with Tanner, and Rebecca would sleep in my room. Around midnight, with the feeling of warmth vanish from the futon, the chills woke me up.
Tanner?
It was still autumn, a bit chilly for a nighttime stroll. Maybe he went to the grocery store without saying anything? It was unusual for Tanner to leave like that, so I decided to look around, starting with checking the car in the garage. That's when I heard it.
No, Tanner.
It sounded like Rebecca's voice coming from the direction of the car. Tanner's car was there, not looking like he went to the grocery store. Thinking Tanner might be nearby since Rebecca called his name, I walked towards the sound.
Being called by my name just gets my heart racing. It's incredibly thrilling.
I spotted the two in the back seat, engaged in something. Just as I was about to approach and call out, I witnessed an unbelievable scene.
Rebecca, can you keep your voice down?
It's impossible, Tanner, be gentler with me. The two of them were naked, embracing, caught in the midst of intimacy. Shocked and wordless, I collapsed on the spot. They didn't notice me, completely absorbed in each other. Maybe it was too hot with the windows up, or they needed some fresh air, but the car windows were open. Because of that, Rebecca's sugary voice and Tanner's animal-like breaths were audible. The disturbing sounds filled me with discomfort and nausea, and I crouched down, trying to hold back vomit. What's happening? What are Rebecca and Tanner doing? Is this a dream? Am I having a nightmare? Unable to believe the scene before me, I kept trying to escape reality. Oblivious to my presence, the two continued their act, engrossed in each other. Tanner's desire for Rebecca, something I've never experienced, painfully tore at my heart. And then, from the two of them, I heard words even more horrifying.
It's like a dream, to be connected with you like this. You really love me, don't you? You did tell me before that you've admired me since our school days.
Rebecca's words, revealing a shocking truth, left me stunned and confused. Were Tanner and Rebecca acquainted since their school days? But how could Tanner have known Rebecca?
When I saw you at the cultural festival, you were just too dazzling. I used Natasha to get close to you. When I heard you were married, I couldn't hide my shock.
Tanner's words brought back a memory. On the day of the high school festival, Rebecca, who was hunting for boys, visited my class's booth. There, as I played the role of a waitress in a cafe, being teased and mocked by Rebecca, Tanner had fallen for her at first sight. Learning that Tanner had targeted me for use since those days brought tears welling up in my eyes.
But now, I'm connected with you like this. When you approached me, it felt like a dream. And to suggest something so wicked, you really are someone not to be underestimated.
Hearing this, my astonishment was apparent. Their relationship started with Rebecca seducing Tanner, who knew he had feelings for her. To be with the married Rebecca, Tanner had to marry me, become part of the family, and not arouse suspicion. Rebecca's husband, Scott, often traveled for work and was rarely at home. Becoming relatives with Rebecca, who was nearly free, meant their relationship would raise fewer suspicions. They reflected on the past, discussing their actions. Hearing this unbelievable truth, I quietly moved away from the scene. Unable to contain my tears, I ran to the entrance, weeping, and collapsed once I closed the door. I can't believe that they had been using me all along. and how they thought of me in such a way. It was unforgivable, absolutely unforgivable. Love turned into rage and hatred, and I, holding the keys, headed to the garage where the two of them were. The garage was secured with a shutter, and the entrance was the only way in or out. By the time I returned, both were exhausted, quietly sleeping in the back seat. Perhaps they never thought I would find out. With a sigh at their foolish actions, I slowly closed the shutter and locked it. Then, I headed to my parents' house, not far from here, and poured my heart out to Dad and Mom.
What's wrong, Natasha? At this hour? And your clothes?
Arriving in my pajamas, Dad was taken aback with his eyes wide. Mom, concerned, immediately let me into the house. Both were somehow awake, which made me wonder. It was unusual for them, with their regular lives, to be up at this time. Had something happened? With that question in mind, I stepped inside only to find Scott, of all people, sitting on the sofa.
Good evening, Natasha. What's going on? Why are you dressed like that? Did something happen?
Scott was indeed sincere and a gentleman. Too good for Rebecca, he too must have been deceived into marrying her. As I hesitated about whether to share the day's events, Scott seemed to sense something and spoke up. "Did you hear it too?" Scott asked. At that moment, my eyes widened in shock. "Hear what?" "This," Scott said, pulling out a recording device. The voices I heard from it left me speechless.
So bold to suggest something so wicked, you really are not to be underestimated.
It was a recording of the very conversation I had overheard between Tanner and Rebecca.
How do you have this?
My voice rose in surprise, and I was visibly shaken. Scott, looking uncomfortable, started explaining. Rebecca had been reckless with money and men. He found out 3 months ago when someone from his company reported seeing Tanner and Rebecca entering a hotel. After discovering the affair, Scott hired a private investigator to gather evidence of their infidelity. Today, knowing Rebecca was visiting my house, the investigator intensely monitored her, capturing this recording.
At first, I thought if money could make up for my absence and make Rebecca happy, I'd stay out of it. But when Tanner got involved, it was a different story. I couldn't stand it, knowing how much you cared for him.
Scott had always cared for me like a real big brother. And he couldn't bear to see me hurt because of them. Just knowing how he cared was a relief to my heart.
I was collecting evidence against Rebecca to confront her for a divorce. I got the decisive evidence today and came to discuss it with your parents.
Turning to Dad and Mom, I saw them looking distressed. Dad was even apologizing profoundly to Scott. "I'm sorry for Rebecca to do such a thing. We're deeply ashamed as parents. We know an apology won't make up for it. Please, do whatever you feel is necessary to find peace." Watching Mom cry and apologize, my heart ached.
Please, lift your heads. It's not your fault. Those who used Natasha and committed these acts are the ones to blame.
Though Scott must be hurting too, he remained composed and comforted my parents. After calming them down, he turned to me.
Natasha, what are your wishes? I'm fine as long as I can sever ties with Rebecca. But you must want more than that.
Yes.
My wife seduced your husband. I bear some responsibility. I want to support you fully, so you can find closure.
Empowered by his resolute gaze, I declared my desire for revenge.
I want to show those two who belittled me what true hell feels like.
Overwhelmed with anger and frustration, I let my tears flow freely. Looking up at Scott, I voiced my true feelings for the first time.
I want them to taste despair. Leave the financial aspect to me. I'll do everything I can. What do you want to do with those two?
Hearing Scott's words, I candidly voiced a plan that had come to mind. I have to say I was surprised at how quickly such a daunting idea had occurred to me. Scott, Dad, and Mom all agreed to cooperate upon hearing it. And so, our family's revenge plan commenced.
Natasha, What were you thinking? How dare you lock us up like that?
2 days later, Tanner and Rebecca, finally escaping from the shutter, showed up at my parents' house. They were still in the same clothes from 3 days ago, likely not having showered. Their clothes were wrinkled and faintly sour-smelling. Rebecca's makeup was ruined, her face and attire a mess.
Who do you think is responsible for being locked up like that?
I calmly responded at the entrance. But my response seemed to infuriate them even more.
Shut up! You think you can talk down to me like that, huh? How could you lock us up and leave us for 2 days? If it weren't for the service guy, who knows what could have happened to us? When we went back home, we found strangers and they showed us some contract and told it wasn't our house anymore. What's going on? Explain yourself.
The truth was, with Scott's help, that garage was set to be demolished. Since the house also belonged to me, while they were locked up, I moved all the essentials to our family home. The house is now being rented out to an acquaintance. It was designed considering eventual cohabitation with our parents, so it found a tenant quickly due to its excellent accessibility. Tanner's belongings were haphazardly packed into bags and sent to his parents' house. With the people Scott brought in, the work was done swiftly and efficiently.
The noise and the stink, give me a break. Just hearing those screams in the morning is enough to stress me out.
I grimaced in disgust at their state. Tanner, unable to tolerate my expression, lunged at me. But Scott appeared and grabbed his arm, protecting me.
Scott! You two really are despicable. A man who dares to raise his hand against a woman. What kind of character do you have? Aren't you ashamed? Why is Scott here, and even Mom and Dad?
It's our family home, so naturally, Dad and Mom would be there. But what truly shocked Rebecca wasn't that. Everyone who used to dote on her now stood behind me, protecting me. She couldn't understand why no one was trying to help her.
Don't you realize the situation you're in? What did you say?
As Tanner shook off the restraining hand and scowled. Scott played the recording from the other day.
What? We were being bugged. But how, where?
They didn't have any wearable devices or mobile phones on them, so it seemed impossible that they were bugged. While they were confused, Scott smirked mischievously.
I've been aware of your affairs for a while now. That's why I hired an investigator to gather decisive evidence of your infidelity.
Upon hearing Scott's words, Rebecca's face turned pale. She thought her affairs had gone unnoticed, never imagining she was under investigation. Overwhelmed by the professionalism of the investigators, Rebecca was speechless, as if engulfed in darkness.
Never thought you'd provide such conclusive evidence. I was so surprised, I laughed, Scott said. That's a crime. Yeah. If we report this to the police. Do you two have any evidence of that? Scott countered.
Their attempts to intimidate Scott were futile. His firm stance, showing no fear and words sounding like he was about to hunt them down, caused Tanner and Rebecca to falter.
If you two, who are financially inferior to me, want to hire a lawyer and go to court, I'm more than ready. If I say I just happened to encounter you and recorded it, it doesn't prove I hired an investigator. If you want to challenge me, gather evidence that could defeat me first.
Indeed, a savvy businessperson. His quick thinking is extraordinary. The two, unable to respond, switched their target to me.
What about you locking us up? That's a serious crime. Do you have proof? What?
Stunned by the question, Tanner was at a loss for words. Now it was my turn to corner them.
There's no evidence that I locked you up, but there's proof of your affair on the garage's security cameras. I bet they captured some unsightly footage of you two getting into the car and doing indecent things.
Hearing this, the color drained from their faces, and they began to back away in fear.
I believed your words for years, thinking you truly cared for me. But it was all an act, just to connect with Rebecca and cheat on me. No, it's not like that. Natasha, please forgive me. I really love and no one else. Me too. What happened with Tanner was just a momentary lapse, nothing serious. I swear it's true. Please believe me, forgive me, Scott.
Realizing their disadvantage, the two abruptly changed their tone and started apologizing. They were clinging to our feet, weeping and pleading for forgiveness in their disgraceful state.
Let go. What? I said let go.
I yelled at Tanner, and Scott shook Rebecca off.
Why would anyone forgive you too? No matter what happens, I will never forgive you. No matter how much you apologize or beg, I will never forgive you. Rot in hell with your regrets.
With an anger never shown before, the two were thoroughly intimidated and fled the house. Dad and Mom, who had been watching worriedly, came to comfort me, and Scott gently stroked my hair, saying I did well. At that moment, overwhelmed with relief, I broke down in tears. The harrowing days I endured felt like hell itself. Clinging to memories, I tried to endure, but I was reaching my limit. Before breaking down, I managed to end that life, and the feeling of liberation made my emotions erupt. Thus, I successfully executed my revenge on Rebecca and Tanner. They fled to Tanner's parents' house, but as I had already explained the situation, they were denied entry and turned away. Moreover, due to their misconduct, John, my father-in-law, refused to employ him any longer. Tanner was already problematic at the company, so it didn't take long for him to be disowned, as I learned later. Rebecca and Scott soon divorced. Despite Rebecca's pleas until the end, she lacked the financial means to contest the divorce settlement and had no choice but to accept Scott's terms. Naturally, Tanner and Rebecca were charged a significant sum for compensation, considering the cancellation of the wedding and all the preparations that were ruined. Thanks to Scott hiring an excellent lawyer, we managed to make the two sign an agreement ensuring they'd pay up, and now they are both working desperately to fulfill it. I explained the situation to everyone who was supposed to attend the wedding. They were all disillusioned but supportive, offering understanding and assistance. I also made sure to explain the situation to the neighbors when the two were locked in the shutter for 2 days. I didn't want any commotion or the police getting involved, which would jeopardize the plan. Being well liked by the neighbors and Rebecca being known as the unpleasant sister who always looked down on me, everyone sided with me. As a result, Tanner and Rebecca are now viewed coldly by everyone. Once living a lavish life, they now lead a life of poverty, struggling daily, considerably thinner, as I've heard from friends. 4 years have passed since the incident. I'm devoted to my work, and Scott is also busy with his own. Dad and Mom are living fulfilling days, supporting my life and career. They even encourage me to find happiness when I meet the right person, motivating me to look forward. Hoping to make them proud, I'm also investing in self-improvement.
Laura here. Annabelle. Melissa. If you're there, please answer.
I banged on the door loudly, but there was no response at all. Just as I was about to leave, thinking they might have gone out, I heard the sound of a key turning. When the door opened, there stood my granddaughter Melissa. She looked anxious, but her face lit up when she saw me.
Granny!
She exclaimed briefly and hugged me tightly. I picked up Melissa and went inside. The room was eerily quiet, and Annabelle was nowhere to be seen.
Melissa, did Annabelle go out somewhere?
Melissa just nodded in response to my question. As we moved further into the house and reached the living room, I noticed half-eaten snacks on the table. I put Melissa down and asked her again.
It's lunchtime, but you were eating snacks? Yeah. When Dad's not here, Santa Claus comes and brings me snacks. Santa Claus? He comes on days when Dad's not here and brings lots of stuff. Mom looks so happy about it. But it's a secret from Dad. Because it would bother Santa Claus.
Hearing this, I became certain of something. Annabelle's flashy outfit the other day was for meeting this Santa Claus. I immediately started to search the house for evidence. I am Laura. I work at a cafe near my home. I lost my husband about 20 years ago, and since then, I have been raising my son Nicholas on my own. Since my husband's passing, the regulars at the cafe have been looking out for me in various ways. With their support, Nicholas grew up well and became independent as a working adult. I shared this joy with all the regulars. A few years after Nicholas started working, he married a woman named Stephanie, and they had my granddaughter, Melissa. Lately, my greatest joy has been seeing Melissa. She seems to have taken a liking to me, which makes me incredibly happy. My hobby is knitting, and I make sweaters and hats, gifting them to her whenever I can. Melissa, I knitted a sweater for you. Seeing the sweater I made, Stephanie also smiled warmly. Thank you as always. Melissa, make sure you thank her properly.
Thank you.
She held the sweater I gave her dearly, humming a tune as she took it to her room. Watching her back, Stephanie and I talked about Melissa's future. Everything was supposed to be fulfilling. But misfortune strikes suddenly. Stephanie fell seriously ill. I took care of Melissa instead, praying fervently every day for Stephanie's recovery. Nicholas, too, was busy caring for Stephanie and comforting Melissa whenever he could. We believed Stephanie would recover. However, after years of fighting the illness, Stephanie passed away. But there was no time to grieve. We still had young Melissa. With Nicholas busy at work, I started to go to his house to take care of her. Seeing Stephanie's resemblance in my granddaughter's face, I vowed to do everything to make Melissa happy. A few years passed by. I was at Nicholas's house, cooking dinner for Melissa as usual. Nicholas returned from work with a serious look on his face.
Mom, I need to talk to you, just the two of us.
He took Melissa to her room and returned alone after a while. I wondered what it was about. A bit anxious, I opened my mouth.
So, what's up?
Nicholas looked embarrassed.
Well, actually, I'm thinking of remarrying.
What? I blurted out loudly. Then covered my mouth, worrying Melissa might hear. Nicholas continued seriously.
Sorry, I know it's shocking. I didn't intend to at first. But thinking of the future, I worry about Melissa being lonely.
Indeed, Nicholas had a point. I'm taking care of her now, but there's no guarantee I can continue to do so. Melissa is still young, she might accept a new mother.
I understand. I'll support your decision. So, what's she like, the woman you're seeing?
Relieved, Nicholas smiled for the first time.
She's a junior at my company. She's been into me since she joined. She's really cheerful, I think Melissa will like her.
That's good to hear.
Actually, I'd like you to meet her before the wedding, if that's okay.
Of course. So the conversation progressed, and a few days later, I was set to meet Nicholas's fiancée. Her name is Annabelle, and just like Nicholas said, she was very cheerful. Throughout our conversation, her constant smile made me genuinely like her. When I first saw him at the company, I knew I liked him. I heard he lost his previous wife, but I didn't care and went for it. I aggressively pursued him. Anyway, she talked a lot. With her youthful appearance, she looked much younger than her age. I was worried about how Melissa would feel about Annabelle, but Melissa seemed to warm up to her quickly. Seeing Melissa so attached to Annabelle, I felt reassured that she would be all right.
Annabelle, please take good care of them. I'm here to help if you need anything.
I bowed as politely as I could, and Annabelle gave a thumbs up. Okay. Leave it to me. Afterward, Nicholas and Annabelle got married and started their new life. I wholeheartedly blessed their future and returned to my regular life. Working at the cafe, joking with the regulars, and knitting while watching TV at home. It was fulfilling, but I felt a bit lonely compared to the busyness of the past. At such times, I prayed in my heart to Stephanie. What would she say if she were alive? I thought about such things as I continued with my knitting. Several more years passed since their remarriage. One day, I went to give Melissa a sweater I had knitted, heading to the condominium where Nicholas and his family lived. Nicholas seemed busy with work lately, often away on business trips. With him not home often, I worried Annabelle might be overburdened with childcare. While delivering the sweater, I hoped to help Annabelle as well. Thinking about what to talk about with her, I headed to Nicholas's condominium. What floor was it again? Arriving at the condominium, I muttered to myself, standing in front of the elevator. Luckily, the elevator was just coming down. 3rd floor, 2nd floor, as the lights blinked, and a sound indicated its arrival at the 1st floor. In contrast to the slowly opening doors, a woman hurried out. I glanced at her and was surprised to see that the woman was Annabelle.
Oh, Annabelle.
Startled by my voice, Annabelle let out a gasp and hopped a little.
Laura? You startled me. What are you doing here?
Sorry about that. I knitted a sweater for Melissa and thought I'd bring it over. Hearing this, Annabelle suddenly seemed unsettled. Her gaze wandered around, restlessly. I noticed that Annabelle was dressed very elegantly. Her outfit and makeup were perfect. Are you heading out? Bad timing on my part. Yes, I have a meeting with mom friends. So, Avoiding eye contact and fidgeting with the hand not holding her bag, Annabelle spoke. Annabelle seemed in a hurry. Regretting not contacting her in advance, I suggested. Don't worry about me, go ahead. Melissa is in her room, right? If I stay with her, you can relax and enjoy your time more. And so, I offered.
Just wait a moment. I can't impose that on you, Laura.
Don't worry about it. You probably need a break too. I'm just an old lady with too much time on her hands. However, she stubbornly refused my offer, and I felt something was off. Sure, I might have been overstepping. But was there a need for her to be so frantic? The truth is, my apartment's a mess. I'm embarrassed for you to see it. That's why I don't want you to come in. It's fine, really. I can help clean up. Finally, unable to hold back any longer, Annabelle snatched the bag with the sweater from my hand. I really can't have you here. I'll make sure Melissa gets the sweater. Please go home now. I'll contact you later. Then she pressed the elevator button. Even as Annabelle stepped in and the doors began to close, she kept a wary eye on me, making sure I wasn't following. As the doors closed slowly, I waved goodbye. Only silence remained. But my mind was anything but quiet. The season was about to turn to autumn, yet her attire was quite revealing. I also noticed a strong scent of perfume. I've met with mom friends myself, but never dressed so provocatively. Maybe times have changed, but Annabelle's attire seemed too intent on attracting the opposite sex. Moreover, the once bright smiling Annabelle didn't smile at all. Instead, she had a glaring look that concerned me. I wanted to chase after her, go to the apartment, and clear my doubts. But Melissa was there too. Not wanting to cause a commotion, I decided not to. I watched the elevator light ascend with a feeling of unease. With worries in my heart, I left the condominium quickly. That night, while knitting and watching TV, I suddenly got a call from Annabelle. I stopped my work and answered the phone. Hello.
Hello. Granny.
Melissa's innocent voice came through. Her voice instantly made me smile. Melissa. It's been a while. Have you been well?
Yeah. And thanks for the sweater. I'll treasure it.
Her words brought relief. Annabelle had indeed given it to her. That's all right, dear. If you ever need another, I'm always here to knit one for you.
Really? That's so nice. Granny, you're like Santa Claus too.
The phrase "Granny, you're like Santa Claus too" oddly struck me. As if there was someone else giving gifts besides me. Yes, indeed. You're such a good girl, Santa Claus must visit you a lot. I subtly tried to confirm the meaning of her words.
Melissa. Don't say unnecessary things.
I faintly heard Annabelle's angry voice from the background. Unaware that I could hear her, Annabelle continued scolding in a stern tone.
You've already said thank you, right? Hang up now. Yes, okay. Sorry, Granny. I have to go now.
Melissa's voice was trembling. More than being upset about being scolded, she seemed frightened by Annabelle's voice.
Understood. Call me again later.
With that, I ended the call and picked up my crochet hook again. The interaction between the two felt oddly strained for a mother and child. Due to a vague unease, I found it hard to continue knitting. Annabelle's flashy attire from the afternoon and Melissa's fearful voice from earlier. Could something troubling be happening? I knew I had to do something, but wasn't sure what. I sat motionless for a while, pondering my next move.
That's it. Nicholas. I should talk to Nicholas.
With his image in mind, I immediately grabbed my mobile phone and called Nicholas. He was on a business trip out of state, but it should be after work hours.
Please, pick up.
Luckily, Nicholas answered the phone right away.
Hello. What's up, Mom? It's unusual for you to call at this time.
I could hear a hint of tiredness in his voice. But I had no time to worry about that.
Hello, Nicholas. Are you okay? I need to talk to you about something. I'm fine, but what's wrong? Did something happen?
Sensing urgency in my voice, Nicholas's tone became serious. I told him about visiting the condominium with the sweater, encountering Annabelle in the elevator hall, and then about Melissa earlier. Nicholas listened quietly as I spoke. After I finished, he replied,
I understand the situation. Indeed, it does sound concerning.
He let out a deep sigh.
That's what I thought. I can't stop thinking about it.
While I was frantic, Nicholas seemed surprisingly calm.
What should we do? What if something happens to Melissa?
Just wait a moment, Mom. Panicking won't help. I think Annabelle is just stressed because I've been busy. We shouldn't make a fuss about it.
Calmed by Nicholas's advice, I regained some composure.
You're right. I'm sorry for jumping the gun. That's okay. But we can't just leave it at that. I'll talk to my company and try to cut my business trip short. We can go to the house together when I'm back.
Indeed, it's better to act together rather than rushing in alone. I agreed with Nicholas's suggestion.
Understood. Let me know when you've decided on a plan. Yeah. But keep this a secret from Annabelle, okay? Talk to you later.
After hanging up, I let out a deep sigh. Nothing was resolved yet, and the unease hadn't disappeared. But hearing Nicholas's calm voice had indeed eased my mind a bit.
Nicholas has really grown up. I need to stay strong too.
Reminding myself of this, I waited for Nicholas's call with a shifted mindset. Soon after, Nicholas contacted me saying he could return earlier than planned. We arranged to visit the condominium together and hoped for the day to come quickly. All I could do was pray for Melissa's safety.
Stephanie, please protect that child. I beg of you.
I continued to plead in my heart. Finally, the day arrived. Leaving my house earlier than planned, Nicholas was not yet there. After informing him I'd enter first, I took the elevator to the apartment. Reaching the door, my heart raced. I mentally rehearsed what to say to Annabelle and braced myself before ringing the doorbell. I rang once, twice, but there was no response from inside. Unable to wait, I knocked on the door.
Laura here. Annabelle. Melissa. If you're there, please answer.
I banged on the door loudly, but there was no response at all. Just as I was about to leave, thinking they might have gone out, I heard the sound of a key turning. When the door opened, there stood Melissa. She looked anxious, but her face lit up when she saw me.
Granny!
She exclaimed briefly and hugged me tightly. I picked up Melissa and went inside. The room was eerily quiet, and Annabelle was nowhere to be seen.
Melissa, did Annabelle go out somewhere?
Melissa just nodded in response to my question. As we moved further into the house and reached the living room, I noticed half-eaten snacks on the table. I put Melissa down and asked her again. It's lunchtime, but you were eating snacks?
Yeah. When Dad's not here, Santa Claus comes and brings me snacks.
I decided to ask Melissa about the doubt that had been on my mind since the other day. Melissa, who is this Santa Claus? While eating the snacks, Melissa shook her head. I don't know. He comes on days when Dad's not here and brings lots of stuff. Mom looks so happy about it. What does Mom say about him? Does she mention Santa Claus's name? Melissa tilted her head in confusion. I don't know. She always leaves with Santa Claus quickly. Only Mom comes back. So, Santa Claus visits often because you're a good girl. But Dad doesn't know, right? Yeah. Dad's never met Santa Claus. Mom says not to tell Dad because it would upset Santa Claus. Hearing this, I was convinced that Annabelle was entertaining an unknown man while Nicholas was away. Presumably, that's what she planned when I tried to deliver the sweater. That would explain Annabelle's behavior at that time. And Melissa, receiving sweets and toys, really is believing in Santa Claus. A cheap way to keep her quiet. That's when I noticed Melissa's clothes were dirty. Melissa, stay here for a moment. I had a bad feeling. Looking around the house, my fears were confirmed. Dirty clothes scattered everywhere, unwashed dishes piled up in the kitchen. Carefully avoiding the mess, I opened the fridge. It was nearly empty, with only expired food inside. Shocked by the state of things, I returned to the living room. Melissa was gobbling up the sweets. Melissa, are you hungry? Haven't you eaten? I'm hungry because I haven't ate. That's why I like eating the sweets Santa Claus gives me. I hugged Melissa tightly, gently stroking her head. It's too much for such a young child to endure. How could I face Stephanie in heaven now? As I loosened my embrace, Nicholas arrived. Entering the room and setting down his bag, he sighed as he looked around. This is a mess.
Dad! Welcome back!
Melissa quickly left my side and hugged Nicholas. Melissa, have you been a good girl? Nicholas embraced her, gently stroking her head as I had. Nicholas, can you watch Melissa? She hasn't eaten anything. I'm going to the supermarket to buy some groceries. Understood. I appreciate it. I hurriedly left and bought essential groceries. Back home, I cleaned the kitchen and cooked a meal. Melissa ate hungrily. Meanwhile, Nicholas and I cleaned the room and secured evidence of Annabelle's infidelity. We discussed how to confront Annabelle with the truth. During our talk, Nicholas sensed Annabelle's return and retreated to the back room. I'm home. You better have not done anything. Annabelle entered, noticing me, and dropped her bag.
Laura! What are you doing here?
She looked around the room and went to the kitchen. And then approached me angrily.
Unbelievable. You just come in and use the kitchen? That's outrageous even for you.
Annabelle's anger didn't seem to subside. And then she directed her anger at Melissa.
Melissa! You opened the door for her. Why do you always do such unnecessary things?
Melissa dropped her chopsticks to the floor and clung to Annabelle's legs, crying loudly. Mom, I'm sorry. I won't do anything bad again. Please forgive me. Annabelle, there's no need to speak like that. Melissa was waiting here hungry the whole time. Annabelle, her face twisted in anger, let out a heavy sigh.
I don't need to be lectured. Melissa is my child. Laura, please don't interfere.
I clenched my fists involuntarily. Yes, her words weren't wrong. But I couldn't overlook this situation for Melissa's sake. But this is like neglecting a child. I understand it's tough with Nicholas being busy. If that's the case, you should have asked me for help.
Enough. Just leave now. I'll ask Nicholas to have a word with you. There's no need for that.
Nicholas, unable to bear Annabelle's harsh words any longer, emerged from his hiding spot. Annabelle was surprised to see him. "Nicholas, you're back already. That was quick. Was work all right?" Annabelle desperately tried to cover up her actions. But it was too late for such efforts. Still, Annabelle seemed oblivious, continuing to speak sweetly to Nicholas. "If you had told me you were coming back early, I would have cleaned up and prepared a feast." But those words no longer had any effect on me or Nicholas. Nicholas signaled me with his eyes. Understanding immediately, I took Melissa's hand.
"Melissa, you're full now, right? Let's watch TV together."
I took Melissa to another room and turned on the TV. Although she was sobbing, she soon became engrossed in the TV.
"Melissa, watch TV for a bit. I'm going to clean up." "Okay."
Leaving my smiling granddaughter watching TV, I returned to the living room. Nicholas and Annabelle were seated facing each other at the dining table. Annabelle had changed completely from her earlier coyness, now sitting quietly, looking down. Nicholas sat with his arms crossed, staring intently at Annabelle. I sat down next to Nicholas. Taking that as a cue, Nicholas began to speak.
"So, can you explain what all this is about?"
Annabelle bit her lip, not answering.
"Listen, Annabelle. I'm not trying to blame you. I share the responsibility, too. I was too busy with work to help with childcare."
Then Annabelle suddenly looked up and glared at Nicholas.
"That's right. It's all your fault for dumping everything on me. You're never home, and Melissa is a handful. It was hard. So, you cheated on him."
I calmly responded to Annabelle's defiant attitude. In her panic, Annabelle started blurting out things we hadn't even asked.
"I did love Nicholas, you know. Since I joined the company. I thought Stephanie's death was my chance, so I married him, but now I regret it."
She continued, taking advantage of our silence.
"But look at Nicholas. He's gotten old. Look at that belly. It's embarrassing. I'm disillusioned. I'm still young and I want to have fun. Is that too much to ask?"
I involuntarily glanced at Nicholas. But he didn't seem particularly angry.
"I get what you're saying. So, who is your affair partner?"
"A friend from my student days, Hugo. We happened to meet recently. He's still wonderful, unlike you." After saying this, Annabelle looked up at the ceiling.
"I shouldn't have married. Melissa is becoming more like Stephanie and is not cute at all. But Hugo likes kids, so she was useful in that matter."
Suddenly, Nicholas slammed his fist on the table. Both Annabelle and I were startled and tensed up. Nicholas glared at Annabelle with anger-filled eyes.
"You think because I don't say anything, you can keep this up? I was going to forgive you, but you keep spouting nonsense."
Annabelle seemed completely frightened by this side of Nicholas. I swallowed hard, impressed by his intensity.
"Mock me all you want, but I won't tolerate you talking about Melissa like that. It's over. We're getting a divorce. I'll be seeking alimony, too."
"Wait." Annabelle's complexion changed the moment she heard divorce. She realized she had said too much. "I won't divorce. I'll apologize for overstepping. I regret what I did to Melissa, and I'll break up with Hugo. Please forgive me."
"No, we're separating. Even if I forgave you now, you'd just do it again. My mind is made up."
I had never seen Nicholas with such a cold expression. Annabelle's anger flared up again at his unchanging decision.
"Stop it. You just admitted it's your fault. I won't allow a divorce."
Hearing this, Nicholas slowly took out his mobile phone and placed it on the table. He operated the screen, and Annabelle's voice started playing. As soon as she heard it, she became silent and seemed to come to her senses. Her earlier statements echoed through the room.
"As you can hear, I recorded your voice. I have evidence of the state of the room and your affair. So, there's no chance of winning for you."
Thus, Annabelle finally compromised and accepted the divorce. For the time being, I took custody of Melissa. It was decided because Nicholas was busy, and it was deemed unsafe to leave her with Annabelle. During the divorce mediation, I started taking Melissa to the cafe with permission. The regular customers were smitten with her and even helped look after her. When I explained the situation to them, one of them, a former detective, suggested filing a criminal complaint. With enough evidence, it would be possible, he advised. I immediately informed Nicholas, and we began preparations for a criminal case. Simultaneously, the divorce mediation also progressed smoothly. Thanks to the evidence we had secured in advance, Nicholas successfully gained custody. I am truly glad I consulted with Nicholas at that time. Regarding alimony, since Nicholas also had some fault, the amount wasn't significant. However, Annabelle couldn't afford it, so her parents agreed to pay on her behalf. Subsequently, Annabelle was arrested. Following the trial, she is now incarcerated. Melissa was anxious until the turmoil settled, but she quickly cheered up thanks to the regular customers and our emotional support. On my recommendation, Nicholas moved to a nearby neighborhood. He's still busy with work, so when he's on business trips, Melissa stays at my house. Our greatest joy is doing knitting together and watching TV. Melissa increasingly resembles Stephanie. Seeing Stephanie's reflection in Melissa's smile, we are all living a happy life.
It's cold. Mom, help me.
Margaret, my daughter who should be at my ex-husband Walter's house, suddenly called my mobile phone asking for help. In the dead of winter, with heavy snow falling, Margaret had been locked in the storage shed by her stepmother Ashley for over 4 hours. In a panic, I rushed over and managed to break open the shed door, only to find Margaret shivering and barely conscious inside.
Margaret, hang in there.
No matter how many times I called her, Margaret didn't respond, her face pale and bloodless. I hurriedly got her into the waiting ambulance and headed to the hospital, praying all the way. I'll never forgive Walter and Ashley for doing such a terrible thing to Margaret. Clenching my fists tightly, I resolved to seek revenge. I am Natasha, 29 years old. My husband Walter was my high school classmate and is now an office worker. We got married 8 years ago, and then I became a housewife. We were blessed with a child and lived happily as a family of 3 with our 7-year-old daughter Margaret. But things changed when Margaret started kindergarten. Walter began to look down on me, and unable to bear it, I divorced him 6 months ago. Of course I wanted to take custody of Margaret, but Walter strongly opposed.
How can a housewife like you raise Margaret?
I couldn't argue, but I couldn't let Walter take custody of Margaret just like that. The court ruled in his favor due to my lack of income and having no living parents to rely on, and Walter took custody of Margaret.
Margaret, I'm sorry, Mom can't live with you anymore.
My words broke off in tears, and Margaret, clinging to me, cried out loud.
I don't want to be away from Mom. I'm sorry. I promise, I'll come to get you as soon as I can.
I hugged Margaret gently, making a pinky promise. Wiping her tears.
Okay, I'll wait.
Margaret forced a smile and said. Since living apart from Margaret, I met her about once a month, enjoying shopping and chatting together, cherishing our mother-daughter time. Margaret became more clingy, always sticking close to me. Our happy times flew by, and every goodbye left Margaret with tears in her eyes, making me feel lonely too. Eager to live with Margaret again, I threw myself into job hunting and finally found a job, making ends meet. But still financially unable to take Margaret back, I worked hard, saving every penny I could. Then, 2 months after the divorce, I received a postcard from Walter announcing his remarriage, complete with a photo. His new wife, Ashley, was visibly pregnant. She looked like she was almost due for delivery. Was he cheating on me while we were married? Suspecting Walter, I called him. Congratulations on your marriage, Walter. How do you know that? A postcard arrived, with your photo. Didn't you send it? No, I didn't. Walter gave a vague answer, so I'm sure that postcard was sent by Ashley just to harass us. You seem so happy, good for you. Ah, thank you. He seemed embarrassed. When I asked to speak to Margaret over the phone,
Mom, Ashley's going to have a baby soon.
Margaret told me excitedly.
Margaret. Don't say unnecessary things.
I heard Walter's panicked voice, and then he abruptly hung up the phone. So it's true. He was cheating even before the divorce. He's always been bad at lying or deceiving, so his panic probably confirms it. Yet, I feel ashamed for not realizing it sooner. From that day, Walter hardly let me see Margaret. When I said I wanted to talk to Margaret, he was blatantly annoyed.
Ashley's getting annoyed, so stop calling, okay? I just want to see Margaret. Please, let me see her. Are you trying to ruin my family? Stop it already.
Walter said that and hung up, not answering my calls after. I'm Margaret's mom. It's frustrating not to even be able to see her. I felt down from the helplessness but couldn't give up. I immediately went to a mobile phone shop and bought a pink kid's mobile phone that Margaret would like. Then, I waited near her elementary school and looked for Margaret as she was coming home.
Margaret. Welcome home. Mom.
When Margaret saw me, her face lit up with joy, and she ran to hug me.
I'm sorry we couldn't meet for so long. Yeah. I was lonely, but I was patient. Dad said if I'm good, I can see Mom. Yay!
I handed the kid's mobile phone to the excited Margaret.
Call me anytime. But it's a secret from Dad and your new mom, so don't get caught, okay? Wow. Thanks, Mom. Got it, it's a secret.
Seeing Margaret's happy face made me smile too. From that day, we messaged each other daily, talking about school and friends.
Margaret, are you having any trouble?
When I asked, worried.
Don't worry, Mom. I'm okay.
She always replied. Each time I saw those words, I felt relieved.
I'm always on your side, Margaret. I love you.
I told her every day. Even though we were apart and couldn't meet, I felt happy to be connected with her through messages. 2 weeks later. In the evening after work, it was snowing. Shivering in the cold, I was heading home when Margaret suddenly called me.
Mom, it's cold, help me.
Margaret's desperate voice came through, asking for my help, and my heart raced.
Where are you now? In the house's storage shed.
According to Margaret, Ashley had locked her in there for over 4 hours. I was almost panicking but tried to stay calm not to scare Margaret.
I'll come to help you right away, just wait a little bit. Okay, I understand.
Right after hanging up, I tried calling Walter's mobile phone several times, but he didn't answer. I was so worried about Margaret that I hurried to Walter's house. Upon arriving, the house was dark, no car, and it seemed no one was inside. What is going on here? I tried to open the storage shed where Margaret was said to be locked in, but it was locked. I broke the door with a shovel nearby and found Margaret inside, curled up and shivering from the cold.
Margaret! It's Mom!
Margaret, barely conscious, had a weak response to her name, and she felt very hot to the touch. I immediately called an ambulance and accompanied Margaret to the hospital. Why did this happen? During the transport, I kept repeating these words in my head, looking at Margaret's ashen face. I had been too reassured by Margaret's messages saying, "Don't worry, I'm okay." Why didn't I realize something was wrong sooner? I continued to blame myself for my naivety. At the hospital, the doctor told me, she's in a very critical condition. Holding Margaret's cold hand as she lay in the bed, unconscious, I felt a burning anger. I will never forgive Walter and Ashley for what they did to Margaret. I'll make sure they pay. I had decided on my revenge. That night, Walter called me. Apparently, he had heard from the neighbors about the ambulance at his house and my presence.
Don't take Margaret away like that. Give her back. Don't interfere with our parenting.
I could hear Ashley's yelling voice too, perhaps on speaker mode.
The custody is mine. I won't let you get away with this. That's right. We'll report this to the police.
Amidst their uproar, I took a deep breath and calmly said, "Margaret has passed away." "What?" Walter gasped. After a moment of silence, he asked with a trembling voice,
"You're lying, right?"
"It's all your fault." Then, in contrast to Walter, I heard Ashley laughing loudly.
Ah ha ha ha. Good riddance. She always compared me to you and never called me mom. I never liked her anyway.
I was shocked. Could it be that for such reasons, this woman was harsh on a 7-year-old Margaret, even locking her in a storage shed?
Besides, Margaret never looked like me. I even wondered if she was really my child.
Encouraged by Ashley's words, Walter joined in. I was barely able to contain my rising fury.
Was Margaret really my child? Maybe she was another man's child?
Their mocking laughter came from the other side of the phone. It was too much to bear. I didn't want to talk to these scum any longer. With trembling hands, I said,
"I'll handle the funeral arrangements. I'll contact you when the date is set."
After hanging up, I sighed deeply. How could they say such horrible things in this situation? I couldn't stop my tears from falling, feeling both sad and frustrated. The next day, I received an unexpected call from Mrs. Simmons, who lives next door to Walter's house. We were close before, and she told me a shocking fact. I immediately called the place she mentioned, confirmed the fact she told me, and gathered some more evidence. Now I can bring them down. Wait for me, Margaret. Then I told Walter I want to discuss Margaret's funeral arrangements, and arranged to visit his house the following Sunday. On Sunday, I visited Walter's house with a man, and Walter and Ashley reluctantly welcomed us.
"You were supposed to handle everything, weren't you? But there are funeral expenses and other things, right? I don't have that much money."
"Huh? What a hassle." Walter scratched his head and, turning to the man sitting with us, arrogantly crossed his arms and demanded,
"Hey, make the funeral for Margaret cheaper. Just give us the cheapest plan with a discount."
They both seemed to mistake the companion for a funeral director, as I had told them we were meeting for funeral arrangements.
"Hey, Walter. Do we even need to have a funeral? It's like throwing money away, right?"
"We have to, for appearances."
"Well, Margaret's life insurance will pay out a lot, and the rest depends on my negotiation skills."
Walter, with a triumphant smirk, was adoringly gazed at by Ashley.
"Life insurance, huh? Wonder if that will go smoothly."
As I muttered. Walter glared at me and said, "Huh?" So, I presented a voice recorder in front of him. "Please listen to this first." What played was a recording of Ashley yelling and Margaret crying out. The sound alone was heart-wrenching. Walter and Ashley looked at each other in confusion.
"This isn't Margaret's voice." "Yeah, right. Must be someone else."
They desperately tried to deny it was Margaret, but I looked at them squarely.
"No. This voice is definitely Margaret's. Don't you recognize the voice of someone you live with every day?"
Still, Walter and Ashley insisted it was a mistake. So, I took out my mobile phone and showed them a video.
"Still going to make excuses after this?"
It was a video of Ashley forcibly trying to lock a resisting Margaret in the storage shed. Both the woman and Margaret's faces were clearly visible in the footage. There was no way they could deny it now.
"Why do you have such a video?" "The dash camera at Mrs. Simmons' parking lot next door caught it. Some cameras still record even if the car isn't moving." The audio was recorded by Mrs. Simmons too, who was worried about Margaret.
Mrs. Simmons had always been fond of Margaret since she was little. She told me over the phone how she had been concerned about Margaret's well-being since I left the house. Gradually, she noticed Margaret losing her energy and thought something was off when she started hearing yelling from the house.
Mrs. Simmons was worried and reported to Child Services. Ashley, you turned away the social workers who came several times without letting them see Margaret, right? Shut up. It was just too much trouble. Yeah, having them come over is just annoying. It's Margaret's fault for not listening, it was just discipline. We were just trying to correct her behavior. What's wrong with that? Yelling and forcibly locking her in a storage shed is discipline? Don't be ridiculous. Margaret isn't your toy.
Walter and Ashley, still defiant, even had faint smirks on their faces. I decided it was time to introduce the man who had been with me. Just so you know, this man isn't a funeral director. He's the director of child services. The man, who had been quietly observing until now. Sorry for the late introduction, he said, extending his business card to Walter. Walter and Ashley's faces turned pale instantly. The director's expression became stern. What you've done is a serious crime. And he said in a cold voice, you're exaggerating. As a director, you should understand that scolding a misbehaving child is a parent's duty. Exactly. Just titles and no sense in what you're saying. Walter and Ashley were still defiant. Enough already. Everything you've done has been testified by Margaret. At my words, Walter momentarily opened his mouth in shock. Then, he suddenly burst out laughing. Ahahaha. How can someone who's dead do that? Ridiculous. Yeah, what's she talking about? Ahahaha. As they pointed at me and laughed, I smiled and informed them. Oh, Margaret is very much alive. What? That was a lie to prevent you from taking her back. Hearing this, Walter and Ashley were shocked, their mouths opening and closing like fish. So, Margaret was a nuisance to you, right? You clearly said that. Then why didn't you give me custody when we divorced? That's because I didn't want to pay you child support. What? That's outrageous. You're the worst, not just as a husband, but as a father too. I was furious to realize the true shallowness of this man who had fought me in court to take away my dear Margaret. I'll take Margaret's custody back through court if I have to, and I'll make sure you both pay. Natasha, don't say scary things. You can have Margaret, okay? Isn't that enough? Not at all. Isn't reflecting and atoning for what you've done also a father's responsibility? Walter still didn't seem to be taking things seriously, so I decided to press further. And one more thing. Ashley was pregnant before we got divorced, right? What are you talking about? Walter's gaze wavered, and Ashley looked down, visibly shaken. No matter how much you try to cover it up, a simple investigation will reveal the truth. Be prepared to pay compensation. That's nonsense now. Can't we just let bygones be bygones? I apologize, so please, let it go. I will never forgive you. That's why I've filed a police report. Upon hearing about the police, Walter's attitude changed abruptly, and he stood up to apologize deeply. I don't want to get arrested. Margaret's alive, right? Natasha, please overlook this. I beg you. Beside him, the previously defiant Ashley also bowed deeply to me. I'm about to give birth. Please, Natasha. Withdraw the report right now. I despised these two for their selfishness to the core. The director also said sternly, why don't you just give up? But suddenly, Walter and Ashley tried to flee, rushing to the door. However, they were promptly arrested by the waiting police officers. It's not my fault. Ashley did everything. What? You're the one who told me to lock her in the shed. The two of them were shouting and resisting in vain. Their commotion attracted the neighbors, who gathered around. In front of the crowd, Walter and Ashley were taken away in the police car. Some time later, Walter and Ashley were sentenced to serve time in a trial. I filed for a change of guardianship and finally got Margaret back. I'm happy that I can be with you, Margaret says with the brightest smile. Determined to ensure a fulfilling life for my daughter, I resolved, I will make Margaret happy, no matter what.